Good evening and good afternoon and good morning to everyone, those who are in different part of the world. Today we have this opportunity to interact with Professor Rohan Gunaratna, who is the Professor of Security Studies, Nayang Technology University. And we are here to listen his detailed perspective about given to his expertise on global terrorism and counterterrorism. Before inviting him to the floor, let me give a brief introduction about our speaker. Professor Rohan Gunaratna is a specialist in national and international security. He is the author of the series of handbooks such as Handbook of Terrorism in the Asia Pacific, Handbook of Terrorism in Middle East, and the most recently, Handbook of Terrorism in Africa. Professor Gunaratna is a specialist of the global threat environment. He received his master's from the University of Notre Dame, where he was Hesburgh Scholars, and a doctorate from the University of St. Andrews, where he was British Chevening Scholar. At the request of the Singapore government in 2002, he established the International Center for Political Violence and Terrorism Research. In 2015, the Ministry of Defense, Sri Lanka, invited him to write the blueprint for a think tank that he named the Institute of National Security Studies. At the invitation of the Ministry of Defense of Indonesia in 2019, he designed ASEAN Our Eyes, the regional intelligence network. He is also authoring several books as international bestseller Inside Al-Qaeda, Global Network of Terror, Columbia University Press, and co-author The Pillars of Radicalization, Needs, Narratives, and Networks, Oxford University Press. Professor Gunaratna, is the Insurgency and Terrorism series of the Imperial College Press London, a trainer of national security agencies, law enforcement authorities, and military counterterrorism units. He was consultant to detainee task force in 134 in Iraq and Joint Task Force 435 in Afghanistan. He interviewed terrorists and insurgents in Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iraq, Yemen, Libya, Algeria, Saudi Arabia, and other conflict zones. A former senior fellow at the United States Military Academy at West Point and at the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy, Professor Gunaratna was invited to testify one of the structure of Al-Qaeda before 9/11 Commission. Admiral William McRaven appointed him to the International Senior Advisory Panel for the U.S. Special Operation Command for advising international intelligence cooperation. Gunaratna received the Major General Raphael H. Van Damen Award. Without delay, I welcome you, Professor, to give your insight on this topic, the shifting landscape of global extremism. Over to you, Professor.
Very happy to address this forum. I am also very happy to speak on the very topic that you wanted me to address, that is the shifting landscape of global extremism. Today, we have seen two movements from Iraq and Syria, which is the epicenter of international terrorism, one to Asia, Pakistan, Afghanistan, India, notably, or the Himalayan space. And the second shift is towards Africa. So we have seen the threat shifting to Niger, Chad, Mali, Mauritania, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. So Middle East still remains a very significant operating theater for terrorists. But in addition to what we are witnessing in the Middle East, Asia, especially South Asia, is emerging as a key theater of terrorist operations. The attacks that we have witnessed in New Delhi, the attacks that we have experienced in Islamabad, in Pakistan, bear testimony to the very active operation of terrorist organizations. Governments have responded very effectively in some cases, and they have failed to respond effectively in other cases. So let me, with a very quick introduction of the threat moving in these two strategic directions, one of Africa, one of Asia, let me share with you, give you some statistics that will help us to understand. So if you look at the 2023 that is 2 years ago, the single biggest terrorist attack was suffered by Israel. Hamas, the Palestinian branch of the Muslim Brotherhood, staged an attack from Gaza into Israel, where we witnessed 1,200 people killed and 251 people taken as hostages. Still, there are 4 hostages remaining in Gaza. So what you must understand is that the threat of terrorism, the threat of extremism led Israel to fight back. And Israel not only fought Hamas and decimated much of the organization, but also Israel attacked the Lebanese Hezbollah that joined Hamas in attacking Israel, and in many ways decapitated the leadership and decimated the rank and file. Of course, it is reviving the Lebanese Hezbollah because Iran is sponsoring Hezbollah. Other than that, Israel also attacked Ansarullah, or the group known as the Houthi movement in Yemen. So Israel today fights a 7-front war. So this is the principal theater of operations in the Middle East. So Middle East remains a very important theater of terrorism. But other than that, a previous network that existed called ISIS, or the Islamic State, has now shifted a lot of their operations to Africa and also to South Asia, notably to India, to Pakistan, and to Afghanistan. If any Indian is in denial, he only has to look at what happened in New Delhi, and of course, more than 30 attacks that the terrorists were planning in India. So there are 3 things I would like to say as to the emerging threat landscape. One is that the principal group that is threatening the world is Al-Qaeda. The second principal group that is threatening the world is called ISIS, or the Islamic State. And the third principal group that is threatening the world is called the Muslim Brotherhood. Hamas is a part of that organization. It's also a global network, very much like Al-Qaeda and like ISIS, and no one should have romantic views about the Muslim Brotherhood. They are Islamists, they promote political Islam, and of course, political Islam in the early 21st century presents the single biggest threat to global security and stability. One only has to look at the START database of the University of Maryland, the global terrorism database. Over 90% of these attacks are mounted by the 3 categories of groups that I have mentioned. Let me quickly go to the theaters one by one. So other than the groups that are located in Gaza, which is Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade, number of other groups, we have also seen the Middle Eastern theater, both the Levant and the Gulf countries, has a number of active groups. I already mentioned Ansarullah of the Houthi movement. I already mentioned the Lebanese Hezbollah. In Iraq, there is Hashd Shabi, or the Popular Mobilization Forces, again, an Iran-sponsored terrorist group, which is very active. And other than that, of course, IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, is sponsoring a number of other groups in Afghanistan and Pakistan. So the threat of both Sunni and Shia terrorism is very significant in the Middle East, but the threat has spread from the Middle East to Africa and to Asia. Let me look at Africa before I speak about South Asia, particularly Pakistan, Afghanistan, India, and beyond. So the African theater of operations emerged when Osama bin Laden relocated from Peshawar in Pakistan in March of 1991 to Khartoum, Sudan. In Sudan, there was Hassan al-Turabi and General Omar Bashir, who had come to power. Hassan al-Turabi was the leader of the Muslim Brotherhood. He hosted bin Laden from 91 April until May 1996. And after that, bin Laden moved back to Afghanistan, where he lived in Afghanistan, where Al-Qaeda established their military headquarters in Kandahar. Previously, Al-Qaeda operated in Peshawar. And of course, after bin Laden moved back to Afghanistan, he operated out of Afghanistan. Al-Qaeda also did a very significant training in Afghanistan when under Taliban regime. But what is not known, and what I would like to share with you based on my book, Inside Al-Qaeda, published by Columbia University Press in New York in 2002, is that Al-Qaeda had a very big network in Africa. So Al-Qaeda provided training to the Egyptian Islamic Jihad. the Islamic Group of Egypt, or the Al-Gama al-Islami and the Al-Jihad al-Islami al-Masri, to the groups in Morocco, in Algeria, notably the GIA, or the Armed Islamic Group, and also the group in Libya, the Libyan Islamic Fighters Group, and also other groups such as in Tunisia. So the threat cascaded from North Africa to the Maghreb, that is to Niger, Chad, Mali, Mauritania. And now we have seen the threat moved even to Nigeria and to Somalia, to Kenya, and it is cascading further south to the DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo. So Africa is the new epicenter of terrorism. I would urge the international community to support the fight in Africa, because the terrorist groups in Africa, notably Al-Qaeda affiliates and Islamic State affiliates, they are very significant and they have considerable funding and support. They're using cryptocurrency, they are using the latest technologies, including drones. But the African forces, security forces, especially those in Somalia, and most recently I have reviewed the forces in Puntland, they are poorly equipped and they need to be supported. Otherwise, Africa will become a very important terrorist theater of operations. Like Afghanistan became a terrorist Disneyland, we will see that Africa emerging as a very important theater. Let me also now go back to Pakistan, Afghanistan, and India. The Indians have a notion that every terrorist attack in India is by Pakistan. This is very difficult for me to convince my Indian colleagues. But they must understand that the two most active groups in the region is the Islamic State and Al-Qaeda. So in many ways, I believe that India and Pakistan should work together in the fight against terrorism. But many Indian leaders lack that vision and lack that mission, and they want to live in history, because in the past, Lashkar-e-Toiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed and Hezbollah Mujahideen, the groups that were sponsored by Pakistan, staged attacks in India. Of course, India also very actively sponsored a number of terrorist groups, not only groups in Pakistan, but also a group called the Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam. And India itself witnessed in its own lifetime how the Tamil Tigers that was trained, armed, financed, directed by the Indian government. The first batch trained in Uttar Pradesh in establishment Tutu in Chakrata, north of Dehradun. And in Uttar Pradesh, after the Uttar Pradesh training, they did the training in Himachal Pradesh. 8 training batches in Tamil Nadu, including where Danu Tenmuli Rajaratnam, the woman who killed Rajiv Gandhi, was trained in Tindugal. So we have seen that governments today must work together, not work against each other, because terrorism and crime is a big common threat. The Islamic State, Khorasan province, the Indian government has recently developed intelligence that they are responsible for the rising plot. This rising plot has been disrupted by the Gujarat ATS, very successful operation, and I congratulate the Gujarat police, especially the DIG in charge of that and the DGP in charge of that operation. It is very effective operation, and I believe that that operation should be very widely discussed, because ricin is an agent and that could have done a lot of damage. There's no antidote for ricin. And this was mounted according to the Indian investigation by the Islamic State Khorasan province. ISKP is led by Sanaullah Ghaffari, alias Muhajir. He's very young, 31 years. He is, in fact, directing the most dangerous Islamic State group. Why do I say that? Because the most dangerous Islamic State group, ISKP, is run by a very young man, and he knows how to harness technology. So he uses Telegram to radicalize, to recruit, to transfer money, and to coordinate and mount attacks. He did that in Russia effectively, where Crocus Hall was attacked. He did that in Iran, where a large number of fatalities and casualties we witnessed. He did that in Turkey. In fact, I visited a church in Istanbul that was attacked by ISKP. So ISKP is a big threat. This group must be dismantled. And I want to share with you that this group is not a state-sponsored group. It is operating independently, and this group, unless it is dismantled, it will become a cancer in our region, meaning the South Asian theater. Already it has become a very significant threat in the Middle East and in Russia and in Central Asia. And of course, they will mount attacks in Europe and North America. Fortunately, the Europeans and the Americans are coordinating and cooperating and building partnerships on intelligence to disrupt ISKP operations. Of course, Pakistan Pakistan has suffered most recently attack, and that is by TTP, the Tariq-e-Taliban Pakistan, and TTP is extension of the Afghan Taliban. So we have seen the most recent attack in Islamabad is by TTP. TTP is a group that is largely located on the Afghanistan side of the Pakistan border. And I hope that this group should be dismantled, because if it is not dismantled, Pakistan will become very much like Afghanistan. The Taliban, the Afghan Taliban, is a very primitive organization. I myself traveled to Afghanistan many times, worked in Afghanistan. I worked with the Detainee Task Force 137, and I worked in Bagram very briefly to interview a number of important detainees. And based on that, I can tell you that TTP is almost an extension of the TTA, that is the Tariq-e-Taliban Afghanistan. And they want to create an Islamic State in Pakistan, very much like the group in Afghanistan. So what is key is for the international community, even India, to work with Pakistan to dismantle this group. Because after this group creates Islamic State in Pakistan, they will aim at India. They will aim at Bangladesh. Already, more than 30 Bangladeshi nationals have traveled to Afghanistan, and they have received training, and they have conducted a number of attacks. So Bangladesh, of course, is on the decline. We have seen a huge rise of extremism in Bangladesh. Why is it happening? After the Nobel laureate Muhammad Yusuf came to power, we have seen that something very sad has happened, that he has given a chance for all groups. He has even given a chance for the Islamists. I'm referring to the Islamists that are in Bangladesh, and that is the Jamaat Islamic group. And the Jamaat Islamic group members have traveled to Afghanistan, and they want to follow the Afghan Sharia model in Bangladesh. If you have Sharia in any country today, that is the end of that country. So I think that one has to advise Muhammad Yunus that he must not permit Jamaat Islami to operate, because wherever Jamaat Islami has operated, it has radicalized the population. There is no political stability, no social harmony. Certainly, there will be no economic prosperity. So, key rule is democracy is important, but you must not allow extremist groups, exclusivist groups to operate in your country. I hope someone will convey this message to the current president of Bangladesh, because if Bangladesh collapses, it's going to impact very negatively globally, because there's a very big Bangladeshi community working overseas. There's a labor diaspora or a migrant diaspora. And of course, there's a very big Bengali population in India. The Bengali culture is a very rich one, and that culture has to be protected. That should be the first and the most important vision and mission of every national of Bangladesh. Not promote these ideologies from Afghanistan to Bangladesh. It will ruin Bangladesh. And of course, the impact on India will be also huge. With regard to India, the Indians have very successfully disrupted a number of attacks. But the Indians have failed in 3 areas. Because this is a forum largely attended by my Indian colleagues, I want to share that with you. You have no national terrorist rehabilitation program. So if you don't rehabilitate your terrorists, they will relapse, there will be recidivism, and they will go back to violence. Build a capable program throughout India. There are ad hoc programs in Indian states. Some have been effective, but they are not giving the achieved impact on India's long-term security and stability. Next is India should work very closely to build with the Muslim community, because most Indian Muslims are very mainstream and moderate. They have to work with them to build a prevention program, that is to prevent the radicalization of the Muslim community. We have seen that radicalization of Muslims in India is no longer a phenomenon of the periphery, of the fringes. It is a problem of the center. Very educated Muslims in the most recent arrests have joined these terrorist groups, including doctors, accountants, engineers, businessmen. So what is key is for India to work very closely with the Muslim community leaders to prevent the further radicalization of Muslims. Most Muslims in India are like other Indians. They are very mainstream. Their loyalty is to India. So whenever there's an attack or whenever there's a riot, make sure that the Indian Muslims are protected, because they will provide you the intelligence and the information to protect your country. The third aspect that India should consider is restoring its relationships with its neighbors. especially with Pakistan. Pakistan and India was one country until partition. And I believe that India is now restoring its relationship with China, because India and China were friends before 1962 border war. And what is so crucial is for India also to send their best diplomat to Pakistan and to build that relationship, because crime and terrorism are common threats. And if these common threats are not addressed, both India and Pakistan will suffer. And not only that, the impact of that is going to affect the entire region. The region of South Asia is key. It hosts a very large Muslim community. In fact, the region of the Asia Pacific hosts more Muslims than the Middle East and Africa. 63% of the Muslim community is in the Asia Pacific region. Why do I refer to Muslims? Because, as I mentioned, according to the Global Terrorism Database, more than 90% of the attacks are staged by groups that have emerged in those Muslim communities for historical and contemporary reasons. There were many mistakes made. For example, the Americans did the right thing by going to Afghanistan after 9/11 because there were 30 terrorist camps. But I want to share with you that going to Iraq was a terrible mistake, because Saddam was not working with Al-Qaeda. That created the fertile ground for the emergence of ISIS. The Americans have never supported ISIS, never supported Al-Qaeda. There is some propaganda to that effect. So I think that what is important is for to counter this misinformation and disinformation, work with the Muslim community, work with the Muslim countries. Let me make a few concluding remarks. One is that to fight contemporary terrorism, the contemporary wave of terrorism, what is so important is that the digital space must be protected. The digital space must be secured. That is not happening. Most of the threats today are in the digital space. And I am now requesting through this medium that the tech companies, whether it is Meta, Google, Facebook, Twitter, any platform, they are all being misused, abused by extremists. Telegram, certainly, and TikTok, certainly. So there must be laws by governments to investigate and prosecute executives of tech companies if they don't take extremist content down. I myself every day review more than 100 cases of extremist content on the platforms that I mentioned. And if tech companies are interested, I'm happy to share that information, because I think that the world will become a very unsafe place if we allow the internet to be polluted by the extremist content. And most recruitment is through the internet. The internet should not be a money-making machine for tech giants. It should be a safe and a secure place, especially for children. We have a case last Friday in Indonesia, a 17-year-old young man in Indonesian school. He went and attacked his own mosque in the school. He dressed like Brenton Tarrant, the white supremacist that attacked two mosques in March of 2019 in Christchurch. So you can see how these attacks are influencing children, teenagers, young adults, and of course adults. So one is securing the digital space. Second is, of course, working together. In a fragmented world, polarized world, it is so important for governments today to move from counterterrorism cooperation to collaboration and partnership. What do I mean by cooperation and collaboration? Can someone tell me? Cooperation and collaboration is building common databases. That is building databases between NIA, between research and analysis, building between intelligence bureau, between NIA, between the military intelligence agencies. Sometimes sharing, building even databases with friendly countries. Second is, of course, exchange of personnel across security and intelligence, law enforcement and military agencies that break the silos. And next is joint training. If you do joint training, when, for example, whenever I've done a training program in Bangladesh, I've invited the counterterrorism police, the CTTU, but I've also asked DGFI and NSI and other agencies to join, because it's so important for us to do collaborative work. But these agencies don't want to cooperate. So I said, we will not train unless you bring all partners together. This should be the singular message, even for India, even for Sri Lanka, even for the Maldives, even for Pakistan, a common threat. Then, of course, if you do joint training, there'll be joint operations. And there should be sharing of experience, expertise, resources, especially technology. So this is the way to move from counterterrorism cooperation to collaboration. Finally, the third thing is this: to brief the political leaders. Political leaders in this century, they do some mad things, right? The government agencies, security and intelligence services, they do great work. But all what they do is compromised by the decisions that made by political leaders. It is so important to brief political leaders constantly and continuously so that they will not compromise national security. The political leadership is the weakness in the global, international, and security framework to fight the threat of terrorism and extremism. So it is so important to appoint to those key law enforcement, intelligence, and military organizations leaders who can influence the political leaders so that political leaders will make sensible decisions. These are the challenges that I have identified to you, and I have also given you some responses. I'm very happy to take any questions from you.
Thank you so much, Professor, for this extensive insight about this terrorism and all. I do have one question that like there are why there is no universal acceptance definition of terrorism, and how you'll differentiate between the civilian rebellion group and the terrorist group, because in some countries, suppose if we take the example of LTT, some group of people, they tell it as a like it's rebellious civilian group, but some like state recognize it as a terrorist group. So how you differentiate between these two, and what are the indicators of terrorism? That is my second question.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let me take the last question first. What are the indicators of terrorism? So before a terrorist attack, there are 14 indicators, signs and clues: propaganda that leads to radicalization, fundraising, procurement, safe houses, training, communications, travel, transportation, forged, adapted, and fraudulently obtained identification, what you call multiple identifications, then surveillance, reconnaissance, initial surveillance reconnaissance or casing, then rehearsal, then final surveillance reconnaissance, and then the terrorist attack. No terrorist attack comes out of the blue. There are operational indicators. There are also behavioral indicators. For example, suspicion, prejudice, resentment, anger, violence or hatred, violence, then ultimately terrorism, that is attacking civilians. I don't think anyone should have any doubts about what terrorism is. Terrorism is the threat or the act of attacks against civilians, non-combatants, right? So a lot of people have these romantic views about terrorism. For example, some people are reluctant to call Hamas a terrorist group, but Hamas killed, maimed, injured, raped, arson, they burnt, and they took hostages. It is a terrorist group. If it happens to your children, yes. If it happened to your parents, your brothers and sisters, it is a terrorist group. Some of my Indian colleagues had a very romantic view of the Tamil Tigers until the Tamil Tigers killed Rajiv Gandhi. So I think that all of you who believe that terrorists are freedom fighters or revolutionaries, I think you should look at the atrocities committed by groups like Al-Qaeda, 9/11 attack, go to the 9/11 museum, go and see what happened to Rajiv Gandhi, go and see what Hamas did in Israel. And of course, the response of states have been very severe. So what is important is to understand that we create a norm and ethic, especially among young people, what is terrorism. We should include law and we should include the subject of security studies or terrorism studies so that children will know about terrorism and they will reject terrorism when they grow up. Over time, they will see the threat of terrorism. Terrorism should be taught as a subject. Counterterrorism should be taught in schools. I'm happy to take any questions, but they should be very short. It should be just not comments. I will not entertain any comments. Just ask one line or one sentence question, okay?
The floor is open, so participant, you can directly unmute yourself and ask the question.
Can I go?
Ask your question.
Yeah, thank you, Professor. Myself, Tirupati. I'm doing PhD on political communication. So Thank you for the lecture. It makes a wide understanding about the terrorism and the government, how it is treating on the civilians, and how the civilians are turned to as the terrorist or something, the
Yeah,
word.
ask your question.
So I just have a doubt. Yeah, yes, thank you. So my question is about how do you see that borderless boundaries? Do you think this borderless boundary will lead towards the non-terrorism or non-terrorism activities in the world? One. Second, how do you see this government is looking the civilians tagging called terrorism? As you said, the Tamilians, right? So I just want to see that the Tamilians, they're fighting for their rights. Then how we can call it them as a terrorist or something else, right? So that's out. I just want to hear from you. Apart from this cybersecurity terrorisms, there are other way of the terrorism, right? So name of the government schemes, right? How are you seeing that pulling the people, civilians to do protest, begging for their own rights? So how do we can see this and all? How do you consider this and all? Just want to know your view on this. Thank you.
I'm very happy that you asked very pertinent questions. So terrorism is a tactic. Terrorism is tactic. It doesn't matter whether the cause they are fighting for is legitimate or not. Of course, governments should address legitimate grievances and aspirations. But what is important to understand is terrorism is a tactic like assassination, like kidnapping, like hostage taking, right? So it is the tactic of attacking civilians to advance their political aims. This definition, unfortunately, has not been adequately understood in India because India has not produced a globally recognized scholar on terrorism as yet. So I hope that Indian government, Indian universities will create specialist counterterrorism centers in their universities to produce a generation of Indian specialists and experts in this field. To, to respond to your question about borderless, most borders are porous. But you must understand that 90% of all terrorist attacks take place in conflict zones. But these conflict zones are largely located in Asia, Africa, Middle East, and Latin America. But there's a spillover of these conflict zones with migration to North America, to Europe, Australia, and New Zealand, where terrorists have built support networks. So what is important is for there to be very good cooperation between governments to monitor the movement of people. For example, a number of Hamas members have been released by Israel, and it is so important for the international community to create a working group to monitor where Hamas is moving, because where it moves, the threat will move. So there must be a greater working together to address the threat.
Thank you, Professor. Just to have one clarity, could you please? It's about how it is related to the ideology, the political ideology. Could you I just want to hear from you how we can
Very,
think
very,
or understand. Yeah.
very, very important question. So there are four ideologies driving contemporary terrorism. One is the politico-religious ideologies. Second is the ethno-political ideologies. Third is the left-wing ideologies. And fourth is the right-wing ideologies. So when you say ideologies, politico-religious ideologies, we have Sikh terrorists, Babar Khalsa International. We have Jewish terrorists, the Kahane group. We have Muslim terrorists, ISIS, Al-Qaeda. Then we have Buddhist terrorists, that is the Om Shinrikyo group and the Viroto group in Myanmar. So then when you come to ethno-nationalist groups, there is PKK, there is IRA, there is Tamil Tigers. Then when it comes to left-wing terrorism, there is the Japanese Red Army, Communist Combatant Cells, Red Brigades, Action Direct. So a number of left-wing groups. And right-wing groups, of course, we have seen most recently a rise in the number of right-wing groups that have conducted horrific attacks, including, of course, the most notorious attack, which is Brenton Tarrant's attack against two mosques. So these are the different ideologies that drive terrorism. Governments must mainstream and ensure that these extremist ideologies are dismantled. Good democracy is dismantling extremist ideologies, not giving them a chance to flourish and thrive. Any other questions? I will take the last question now.
Thank you, Professor.
Participant, if you have any question, directly you can ask the professor.
So my name is Mekhala.
Ask your
I have a
question.
question for you. Yes, I have a question for you. You talked about the utilization of digital space in global terrorism. I want to know if in what ways could the new surge of AI reshape the extremism arena, or is there an overall impact on global terrorism of AI?
Mekhala Dandene has asked a very important question. That is how AI is shaping the threat environment. So terrorist groups are constantly evolving. They are very innovative and very creative. They are certainly more innovative than governments. Governments have to constantly catch up. So already threat groups are using AI to develop information and intelligence for them to conduct attacks. And that is why it is so important for there to be research on how the digital space has changed dramatically with AI. So terrorist groups initially started to use the digital space in 2003-2004 period, and in a very significant way. Of course, they've had a presence since 1993, but as websites. But since 2003, they have heightened the activity. And with AI, we are seeing very significant advancements of threat groups. So there should be the most recent recruits to law enforcement, military and intelligence services. They should be all trained in cyber and in AI. And I hope India can play a very important role in this, because India has some of the best minds to study AI and those who are working in the tech space. I thank you very much. I thank all of you. If you have any questions, you can write to me, or you can write to Dr. Sanghamitra, who is a very good scholar and a very good specialist. And I hope that we can all work together to counter the threat of radicalization and the threat of terrorism, so that we can promote moderation, toleration, and coexistence among all communities. And we should be able to build a harmonious world. If we do it in this generation, the threat of terrorism will reduce. We can mitigate it, so that the next generations will live in peace and harmony. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. With this formal vote of thanks, I'm thanking Professor for accepting our invitation and giving your time and putting insight in a broad manner how terrorism from the Middle East, like West Asia to Africa, then to Asia, and how this contemporary time, how they're using the platform of digital media and other like AI and all to create their work. And I'm thanking all the participants, and I'm thanking IAPSS for this platform and all the media team for their efforts. Uh, and it's a great insight. You gave suggestion to the in India. What are the 3 points? How India can go ahead towards that? Thank you so much, Professor, for such a huge insight. With this vote of thanks, I'm winding up this session. So it's almost 1 hour, so we can wind up the session. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.